Those so sure of their own moral superiority that they would elevate themselves to judges and cancel others are in a frenzy right now. And where our entertainment is concerned, they're coming for everything from Gone with the Wind to Fawlty Towers and even for Paw Patrol. A series I just so happen to be quite familiar with and that you'd think would pass the ideological purity test. But no. There have been many such cancellations, and many more will no doubt follow. But in this editorial, I will restrict myself to these three: Gone with the Wind, Fawlty Towers, and Paw Patrol. I'll go through why they were cancelled, my view on the problems with judging entertainment of the past through the prism of today, and what this all could mean for the future of entertainment. The perhaps most notorious of all recent cancellations is Gone with the Wind. A classic by every possible measure, the 1939 feature film is one of the most esteemed, and when adjusted for inflation, one of the most commercially successful feature films of all time. It was based on the novel of the same name by author Margaret Mitchell, who obviously was a woman, and of the 8 Oscars it won, one went to Hattie McDaniel, the first black actress to ever win an Oscar. However, none of this mattered, for while the movie doesn't condone them, it nonetheless depicts a fictionalized version of racial relations of a bygone era. And that was enough for Warner Media to pull it from HBO Max. Even if they said the movie was going back eventually, with a content warning of some kind. That's business speak for trigger warning. The move garnered them a lot of backlash, and rightfully so. But in their defense, they had been placed in something of a hopeless predicament, because they didn't suddenly decide to pull the movie down just for shits and giggles. No, when HBO Max launched, someone was there, browsing their content, looking for something to be offended by. Bounding into comics did some digging and found out who. That someone was John Ridley of 12 Years a Slave fame. He used the LA Times to publicly demand that Warner Media remove Gone with the Wind from HBO Max. However, he didn't want anyone to think he was calling for censorship, God forbid, so he would be okay with them putting it back after some respectful time had passed, and then with a content warning. That put Warner Media in a very tight spot. If they pulled the movie down, they would have caved to the pressure and censored art, and be called out for that. They would certainly lose a lot of the goodwill that announcing the release of the Snyder Cut had just garnered them. But if they had let the movie stay up, after a blue checkmark had so publicly demanded they take it down, well then all the other virtue signalers on Twitter and in the industry and entertainment media complex at large might come gunning for them. So they went with the least painful option and took the movie down. Can't really blame them for that. They're a business, and Gone with the Wind evidently is not where they're willing to draw the line. They've said the movie will go back up at some point in the future, presumably after some undefined, respectful time has passed. With a content warning that no doubt absolves Warner Media of suspicions about them and their attitudes that no one in their right minds should be having in the first place. By then, of course, everyone who wanted to see it right now will already have seen it on iTunes and Amazon, where it has done bangbusters since HBO Max dropped it. Too bad, because HBO Max really could have used all of that traffic. But, if it is any solace, they aren't the only ones dropping titles. Fawlty Towers, the 1970s sitcom by John Cleese of Monty Python fame and his then-wife Connie Booth, is widely considered the greatest British sitcom of all time. Which, in my opinion, makes it a contender for the spot of the greatest series of all time any categories, period. Although I personally prefer both Blackadder and Allo Allo to it. Be that as it may, we are still talking about one of the all-time greats here, and it is perhaps most known for its "Don't Mention the War" skit in the episode The Germans. Well, in a recent purge, the BBC saw fit to remove that one episode alongside a whole host of other episodes from other series as well. Not because of insensitivity to Germans, they remain fair game, but because in this episode, one of the recurring guest characters known as the Major uses the N-word when referring to Caribbean sportsmen. John Cleese has experienced this kind of thing before, case in point, Life of Brian. Among many other controversies surrounding it, it was for a short while there actually banned in my homeland, which is an eternal blight in our history. But Cleese got us back for our double standards, and rightfully so.
And so the answer is given for this year, but one question remains. What has happened to the once all-conquering nation of Viking heroes? The answer? They have turned into a sly little pimple on the buttock of the world's conscience. Sneakily, they try and earn our respect and admiration with their hypocritical peace chatter, when the truth is that these boring, flat-headed Scandinavian oafs are the same gang of psychopathic killers they were 1,000 years ago. All this peace.
Still being as witty as ever, Cleese had some choice words for the BBC about this situation as well. Speaking to Australian newspaper The Age, Cleese said, "The Major was an old fossil left over from decades before. We were not supporting his views, we were making fun of them. If they can't see that, if people are too stupid to see that, what can one say? Fawlty Towers has given a large number of people a great deal of happiness. Why would you want to stop that?" he added. It reminds me of the definition of a Scottish Presbyterian as someone who has a nasty, sneaking feeling that someone, somewhere, is having a good time. The backlash was swift, and the BBC has since let it be known that that episode will go back up at some point in the future, but with a content declaration in place. The episodes of other series that were also taken down may not be so lucky, because the pushback was over Fawlty Towers. So why did they move it in the first place when it garnered them nothing but pushback? About this, John Cleese had the following to say. "A lot of the people in charge now at the BBC just want to hang on to their jobs. If a few people get excited, they pacify them rather than standing their ground as they would have done 30 or 40 years ago. That is a very astute observation right there. I believe the people in charge are afraid. They know that their entire industry is too closely tied in with the ideopolitical direction that they, now when it's too late, also see is producing cult-like acolytes. And now, no one will have their backs if they suddenly try standing up to the mob. That's why Warner Media pulled Gone with the Wind the moment one person publicly demanded that they do. The backlash of standing their ground might be worse than just giving in and caving to the demands. And the mob knows this too. In the previous video on this topic, I covered how the individual person with the power to cancel the long-running reality show Cops had been publicly named and shamed. And by way of the Washington Post no less, presented with a very public demand that he do just that. Cancel Cops. Within hours of that video being published, Cops had indeed been cancelled. That brings us to the most ridiculous cancellation attempt yet. Both Disney Jr. and Nick Jr. have national channels across the world, and their programming is virtually exactly the same everywhere. Since I just so happen to have kids in that age range, Paw Patrol is a series I'm quite familiar with. In fact, I've spent more time watching Paw Patrol and stuff like that as of late than I have on things I actually want to see myself. So on that note, I would like to extend a thanks to the makers of Peppa Pig and the Storybots for being smart enough to realize that parents will be forced to watch with the kids. So kudos for making your series funny and clever and therefore possible for adults to enjoy as well. The makers of Paw Patrol did no such thing, so they can suck it. But however much I may suffer underneath the smile I put forth every time I find myself having to watch Paw Patrol, doesn't mean I think they should be cancelled. That someone actually does only goes to show that no matter how much you give and give and give to certain zealots, it will never be enough. Because you'd think that something like Paw Patrol would have passed the ideological purity test with flying colors. Paw Patrol takes place in the utopian Adventure Bay, which is run by the slightly aloof Mayor Goodway. In this utopia, public services like police, the fire brigade, and rescue services all appear to have been defunded and replaced with Paw Patrol, a team of puppies with robotic enhancements managed by Ryder, a 10-year-old go-getter. Together, they frequently have to clean up the mess left over from the series' antagonist, the evil and incompetent Mayor Humdinger of Foggy Bottom. The series has been widely praised by critics, so what's the problem? Well, it would appear to be this little pup right here, Chase. Of all the puppies in the Paw Patrol, he is the most obedient, the most loyal, the most competent, and in my view, the biggest suck-up. But he is guilty of the recent crime of wearing a police uniform, and so shining a positive light on law enforcement. And in this climate, there can't be any kind of positive spotlight on police, even by way of an animated puppy. This all started, as per usual, on Twitter. On June 2nd, the official Paw Patrol Twitter account announced that they would be muting their content until June 7th, in order to give access for Black voices to be heard, so they could continue to listen and further their learning. Well, what they learned was that quite a few on Twitter essentially called for Paw Patrol to be defunded and Chase to be euthanized. This might have been said in jest, but it became real when the New York Times gave their opinion on the situation, and in not so many words, agreed that the Paw Patrol needed to be defunded and Chase needed to be euthanized. The New York Times wrote, and I kid you not, as the protests against racist police violence enter their third week, the charges are mounting against fictional cops too, even big-hearted cartoon police dogs. Or maybe especially big-hearted cartoon police dogs are on notice. The effort to publicize police brutality also means banishing the good cop archetype, which reigns on both television and in viral videos of the protests themselves. Paw Patrol seems harmless enough, and that's the point. The movement rests on understanding that cops do plenty of harm. To be clear, so far, the demands to cancel Paw Patrol are just demands. They have not yet been met. All of the cases covered in this video boil down to someone making themselves arbitrators of what is and what is not acceptable entertainment. That is a very, very slippery slope, and it doesn't lead anywhere nice. Censoring entertainment is a hallmark of societies no one in the Western world should want to align themselves with. The people who make themselves judges over what is acceptable tend to be historyless and ignore the wider context. It will be interesting to see how history judges these judgers. In the meantime, though, there is one thing you should consider. When it comes right down to it, streaming is video rental. You do not own the copies, as DC fans just discovered on HBO Max. Your favorite titles can be taken away at a moment's notice. That might not seem like a big deal today, but give it 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, then physical media might not be so easy to come by. If classics are removed from the streaming services of the future, or altered to make them acceptable to the standards of the day, the original may be lost to you. So preserve your physical media. Being a cable cutter may have its upsides, but it's better to have a physical collection and not need it, than to suddenly find yourself needing it without having it. Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments. And if you want a kick-ass Midnight's Edge t-shirt, or one that makes the statement, The Last Jedi is not canon, all while making a more tacit statement to the industry of how they view us as fans, then you can find both in the description.